Welcome to Tools for Success, 5 Myths about College Admissions. My name is Karen Furminger. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions for Retention here at Bear Creek. I will be your host today. We have over 187 guests signed up for tonight's event, many of our own current parents, but we have a lot of outside guests as well. A special welcome to you. Here at the Bear Creek School, our mission is to provide a high-quality Christian liberal arts education in a nurturing environment that will enable each student to become the individual God intends. You realize after 34 years, this mission is still our guidepost. Our graduates embrace the world with wisdom, compassion, and courage. Tonight's discussion will dispel the common myths surrounding college admissions and will help students maximize their high school experience and their college potential. We have a full night. Katie has prepared well for us, so let's get started. I'll open us up with a word of prayer. Father God, we do thank you for this opportunity that we can connect via technology. We just thank you that we're taking a moment to hear from Katie, an expert and someone who has experienced it herself. And we just are grateful for the opportunity to bring peace to the whole college process and to have some realistic facts given to us as well, Lord Jesus. So bless our time, we pray, in thy precious name. Amen. Well, I'm super excited to introduce to you Katie. Katie is attended Bear Creek. She graduated in 2013. And Katie has joined Bear Creek again as an employee in 2017. And she was the Assistant Director of Admissions for middle school and upper school. Last year has been a big year for Katie because now she's our Dean of College and Academic Advising. And as well, she was able to complete her master's from not Davidson, that's where she got her BS degree, but her master's is from Georgetown. And we're very excited that she's able to be in this role. Katie, when she's not busy here at work, she loves to box and she enjoys podcasts and reading. And she has two lovely dogs, Scout and Oscar, and she gets to have some wonderful times with them, and even trains for what do you call that, Katie? Detection, that's it, yes. So it's really fun to see Katie back here and as an employee and contributing all her knowledge. Katie, I'll let you take it away. I know you have a full night planned for us, so welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that wonderful introduction and for setting us up for this evening. And just to echo what Karen said, welcome to all of you virtually through the internet. I am thrilled to be spending some time with you tonight about a topic that, frankly, I am very passionate about, and that is dispelling myths around this college admissions process. I wanted to just briefly start off by highlighting a couple pieces of my background and my relationship with higher education in particular that make this a topic of interest for me. As Karen mentioned, I attended Bear Creek, and then I went to Davidson College for my undergraduate degree, which is a small liberal arts school in North Carolina. For those of you that are basketball fans, that is where Steph Curry graduated from, so go Warriors. And while I was at Davidson, I started off first as a tour guide, which is an unpaid job in the admissions office where you get to show prospective families around campus, and ultimately worked my way up to a paid role in the admissions office where I was reviewing files and doing information sessions and really working closely with the admissions process at Davidson. That actually then sparked my passion for admissions in general, which is how I ended back up at Bear Creek. In the meantime, as Karen mentioned, I was also working on my master's from Georgetown, where I took that love of higher education and admissions and studied it in an academic setting. So I just completed my master's in higher education administration. And as you saw, my thesis, which is a mouthful, was an exploration of standardized psychosocial measures within higher education admissions. Maybe someday I'll do a presentation specifically on that. But anyway, that background has really given me a lot of context, not only to work with Bear Creek students as they go through this process, but hopefully to share information with you as well. So my goals for us this evening are, first of all, I just want to start with an overview of higher education to make sure we understand the historical context for where we are today. And then the second piece is where the title of this presentation comes from. I'd like to discuss some common myths that I hear a lot about college admissions. And then finally, I want to leave you all with accurate resources for ways that you can understand this college admissions process for yourself, for the students on the call, and of course for your children, for those parents on the call. So I'm going to start with a brief history of higher education. And for those of you that came to my presentation in November on finding your best fit college, this will be a very similar recap for you all. But as I said, it's incredibly important to contextualize. So for those of you that came to that presentation, a recap. For those of you that did not, hopefully some valuable information. So really the mission of higher education has changed a lot since the founding of the first university in the United States, which was Harvard in 1636. At that time, the goal of education was really to provide men with philosophy and religious education. And now colleges focus on providing education for all students that want to continue after high school. And also really within a cultural context, we look at college now as this sort of catalyst for teenagers to become adults and have a really formative time in college as they gain their adult identity. This evolution of higher education has been predicated by three important trends. The first is that the number of colleges across the United States has increased dramatically. In particular, in 1940 to 1960, that time period, we had the introduction of the GI Bill, which is where you see that giant spike with schools. And why does this matter? It means that students now have a lot more options than they used to have in where they can go to college. The second thing we see is an increase in the number of students that are attending college. Again, the GI Bill and other different education initiatives really helped contribute to this, and there has been an increased access on access and inclusion for students. The third trend that we see is one that parents you will certainly know about, which is the cost of higher education has increased. The number that I like to share, I think it's helpful, is that since 1980, inflation has increased 236%, and the cost of tuition has gone up 1,200%. So that's a pretty astronomical difference that you can see. So college is becoming more expensive, which means it's an even more significant financial decision for students to attend higher education institutions. So all three of those are upward trends. And then of course we have our downward trend, which is that acceptance rates across all of higher education have decreased. And this is a little bit of an older chart. It stops at 2013, but I really like it because it's a great visual for also different types of schools. So Lehigh, UConn, and Harvard are all three very, very different, fantastic, all three schools. But you can see the way in which all three of those institutions, their acceptance rate has decreased because demand has increased. And since this chart is a little bit older, I think it's really important to note that the COVID-19 pandemic has actually accelerated this decrease in acceptance rate as we have more students typically applying to more schools. Just to give you context, I mentioned this at the Best Fit presentation. University of Chicago reported at an event that I was at this past fall that last year they had a 1% acceptance rate. So very, very low. We see those decreased acceptance rates for many schools, not just the highly selective, but across the board. So what do all these trends mean, and why do I want to start our presentation with this today? Well, the reason why is that the scope of college admissions is much broader than it historically has been in the past. And as a result, this sets the stage for lots of information about the college admissions process, far more than we've seen in the past. And also with this very helpful information, there's also a lot of misinformation out there about the college process. So as more people are going, there's more options, therefore more research is needed, and as acceptance rates are being driven down. So my goal today is to dispel some of the most common myths that I have heard about college admissions. And how I chose these are what I just said. So they're the ones that I hear often from parents. I sometimes hear this on online forums. I certainly hear my students saying some of these things from time to time. And you'll also hear these in some media outlets as well. And they are very understandable misunderstandings as well. So I don't want to say myths as in, oh, how could someone think this? No, absolutely not. There's a lot of understandable reasons why these things are said. And so I want to talk a little bit about that as well. And so, like I said, that's the top five that I hear. And hopefully some of these resonate with you so that we can work together on spreading some information about this college process. So with that, I want to transition into talking about those 5 myths. So the first myth that I hear is that grades are everything when applying to college. And this takes 2 forms. Sometimes I hear parents and students saying, you know, a student can only get into a good college, whatever that means, if they have a perfect GPA. Maybe that means all A's, all A pluses, 4.0, 5.0. Bear Creek uses a 4.0 scale, but schools have all different ways they measure that. But however it's measured for you, a perfect or almost perfect GPA. I also hear the flip side of that, where parents or students are concerned that their GPA is not perfect and therefore means that they won't be able to get a college education. And I want to assure you that neither of those things are true. Regardless of your GPA, I will work with you if you're at Bear Creek, or your college advisor will work with you, or you can do your own research to find schools that are a great fit and can allow you to continue getting a great education. And for those of you, those students that are looking at more highly selective schools, I can also assure you that you do not need a perfect GPA. And frankly, that's not what schools are looking for in either case, and we'll get into that in 1 minute. But I want to just acknowledge the cause of this, which is that as we have seen that increase in the number of applicants for college, and we have seen that decrease in acceptance rate, it has created this fear of a hyper competitiveness within the college admissions process. And so students and parents are often asking the question of, how do we differentiate? How do we set ourselves apart? How do we make ourselves the most desirable candidate for these admissions committees to review? And so that's really where this comes from, which is completely an understandable reason why this myth has been generated. However, the truth is that colleges value students who challenge themselves within their own context. And context is relevant on a couple levels. The first is, what is the overall rigor of the school? At Bear Creek, we offer a highly rigorous college preparatory program within our high school as well as our middle school to really prepare students for the next step in their college journey. And that is actually data that the colleges ask for. So I submit a report every year on what Bear Creek's rigor looks like, what sort of classes we offer, etc. And so that gives colleges context. If you are not a Bear Creek student, then your school will also send a similar report illustrating the rigor of your institution. So it's on an institutional level, the type of rigor that you're being exposed to as a student, but then it's also very importantly individualized to the student themselves. So for some students, that means completing more than the minimum graduation requirements. So if we require 2 years of foreign language in high school at Bear Creek, it means challenging yourself to take more. Maybe that means taking an honors or an AP class, particularly in an area of academic interest. So if you're like myself and you love reading and writing, then challenging yourself maybe with an honors or AP English class. If you love math, then you can take advantage of our accelerated math track here at Bear Creek and go up through 3 years of calculus with multivariable. So again, it depends on who you are as a student, and parents, it depends on your child, but within who they are challenging themselves academically. And additionally, that challenge may also mean diving deeper into a class or sticking with an area of academic interest that is maybe not your top. So instead of if you are someone that is not as wild about language or maybe science, instead of just dropping those the minute you can, really challenging yourself as a student and continuing to take those classes. Maybe if it's not your favorite, maybe not the most rigorous offering, but a class that allows you to continue to expand your knowledge base. So to sum all that up, I know that's a lot of different specifics, but the point is that colleges want to see students who challenge themselves. I often get this question from students. Is it better to take an AP class and get a B, or a regular class and get an A? And the answer is, of course, it depends on the student, but generally speaking, what I would encourage the student to remember is that colleges want to see you've challenged yourself, not just that you have skated through and not challenged yourself, but what that challenge means. Again, it's so important to say, really depends on who you are as a student, and that does not look the same for every student, nor should it. And it's a lot about knowing yourself. That's where myself and our amazing academic advisor, Aileta Paramo, who works with our incoming 9th graders, as well as 9th and 10th grade students on academic advising. That's why she is so valuable, is because she will help make those differentiations. So I think it's really important to remember that colleges are asking the question, what kind of student will this person be when they get to campus? So if I had to say what colleges are actually asking, that is how I would frame up that question. The second myth that I often hear is that a student needs to participate in 20 activities or clubs to be a competitive applicant for colleges. And again, this is a really understandable myth that's out there, because colleges began discussing this term, which I'm sure you all have heard, of a well-rounded student, again, after the passing of the GI Bill. If, like me, you're ever doing an educational program on higher ed, the GI Bill is probably the answer to 75% of the questions. So again, back to the GI Bill. That's where that term started to come from. Colleges started looking at more than just the academic picture of a student, which is actually fantastic. They started wanting to think critically about what other gifts and talents can students bring to campus. And so they started using that term of well-rounded applicant, which opened up greater access to higher education for a broader number of students. So really well-intentioned from higher education institutions. However, what that has meant is that it has been interpreted by students and parents that to get into college, you need to do 20 activities or clubs, etc. And the number 20, also just as a little interesting fun fact, comes from the fact that on the Common Application, there are 20 slots for activities. So there became this misnomer that, well, there's 20 slots for activities, so I must need to fill all 20 of them, which is absolutely not the case. The truth is that colleges genuinely want to understand a student's passions. Again, colleges are asking the question, how will this student contribute to our community? They are looking to build a diverse class of students. They want athletes, comedians, readers, artists, entrepreneurs, etc., to fill their first year class. And colleges are very intentional about this. And so I tell my students often in this process, remember, that's what colleges are asking is, what is Katie going to bring to this school? What are the things that she loves doing that she will continue doing in college? So I know we have a range of ages of students here. We intentionally made this event for middle school and high school students. And so I wanted to speak directly to how should students in both of those divisions approach this idea of finding and then spending time in your passions. For my middle school students on the call and for parents with middle schoolers, this is a time to be broad. This is a time to explore various interests and activities. At Bear Creek, I know we have a really exciting club program. In the middle school, we have a great middle school athletics and arts program, and I would encourage students to take in as many opportunities as they can within the scope of what they have time for. Again, that still doesn't mean you have to sign up for everything, but take it as an opportunity to try some new things and just explore. I remember when I was a student, I tried volleyball in middle school, and volleyball is a fantastic sport. It was not for me, but I'm glad I tried it and was able to then focus in high school on basketball, which was a sport that I did find I really loved. So middle school is a time to explore, to say yes to different activities, to say yes to maybe church volunteering, community volunteering, etc. And then as you get into high school, so for my 9th, 10th graders, and even into 11th grade on the call, this is when you should start to begin to dedicate additional time and energy towards activities that you love. Now, for some students, that might be one thing. They may love soccer, and that may be what they want to spend all their time doing. I have a senior this year that's in that camp, and they play Bear Creek soccer, they play club soccer, they coach soccer, so they both do private lessons to help students build their skills, as well as helping coach camps in the summer, and that's fantastic. For other students, it may be a few activities. I have some seniors this year that spend a lot of time with our arts department. They are part of an ensemble. They are part of band. They are part of choir. And they also may love horseback riding and do that. And then there are some students that actually really, truly do have quite a few activities that they love and that they want to continue to be involved with. And that's fine too. It doesn't have to be one, it doesn't have to be few, it doesn't have to be many. It truly is about directing a student in an area of their passions and then finding and searching out ways to dig deeper into that. I already mentioned the soccer player. I wanted to give 2 more examples that I think are relevant. If you're a reader and that's something you love doing, then keep reading. It's actually, colleges love to see that. Some colleges actually still require, Davidson used to, I don't believe they do anymore. They actually used to require a book list of what have students been reading. So if you're a reader, and maybe you're not as interested in sort of organized activities, that's great, or whatever that might be. But ask if there's ways to volunteer with our lower school reading program here at Bear Creek. Libraries love having people involved, especially younger generations. Find a way to get involved with programs at your local library. Join a book club, create a book club. There's so many fun ways that you can deepen that love of reading. And then I know I also have a lot of students that love computer programming, and that is something they're deeply passionate about. We have a programming club at Bear Creek and offer AP computer programming, but for students that's a passion and want to dig deeper, there's so many ways to get involved. Design a website or a game for your friends. I know that's something one of my seniors did this year. Take summer camps where you can deepen your knowledge of different programming languages, or do a self-study. There's so many great resources for CompSci Online. See if you can do an internship. We have so many tech companies in this area. I don't need to tell you that, but what's a way in which maybe you can shadow someone in a tech role and learn about what they do? Again, these are just a few examples, and my goal with the examples is not to be prescriptive, but to be descriptive of the type of things that you can do as you deepen those interests as you get into high school. Again, to re-emphasize, colleges want students who don't have a surface level commitment to activities, but someone who plans to continue pursuing their passions in college. And the way colleges identify this is by really looking at what students have done and understanding the depth of passion that they have applied to whatever those interests may be. Okay, the next myth is that college reputation is everything in choosing a school. And I put up this picture. I screen grabbed this from the internet. This is the US News and World Report college ranking, which is by far the most famous and iconic college ranking, and really what kind of shaped the college ranking system, frankly, to this day. And again, I understand where this myth comes from. As we've seen an increase in the number of colleges and options for students, oftentimes parents and students ask the question, well, how do we differentiate all these schools? How do we know which one is a good school or not as good of a school where my child or I will get a strong education? And so oftentimes in a data-driven society, we're like, let's rank them. Let's see which schools are better than others. And I use better in quotations to be clear. And ranking is not inherently bad. It is okay to look at these rankings, and I'm sure you will. So if I told you not to, it's human nature to look at them. But I really, really want to mention two pitfalls with the rankings. The first is that it's important to understand that these rankings are based on a series of tangible criteria, and colleges know those criteria, and colleges work tirelessly to improve their standings and rankings by maximizing those specific criteria. And the reason I say that is sometimes I think we look at these rankings and we think it's this, kind of almost magical system of, okay, we just know this school is better than another. But really, colleges work quite diligently. And if you read articles on this, there are some examples of colleges that have gone to quite extreme measures to increase their rankings, not really by changing any programmatic elements or any community elements or any alumni outcomes, but by tweaking a specific statistic by either increasing one that's really well known as the number of Pell recipients. So the Pell Grant is an amazing grant that the government gives, and the more Pell eligible students a college admits, that increases their ranking. Of course, it's just one of many, many criteria, but the point is that colleges know this and they are actively working to increase their ranking. So I just think it's important to understand that colleges are savvy about this. They want to be ranked highly, and there is some benefit, of course, it is something about their program, but oftentimes it is a pretty arbitrary thing that increases or decreases a school's rankings. And then the second piece is that the second pitfall is that a sole focus on rankings means that oftentimes students and parents are neglecting other really important, valuable resources, which I promise we'll talk about later, that provide important, informative data for students to understand what would be a good fit college for them. I encourage all my students, if your college list that you bring to my office is just basically pulled from the US News and World Report, we're going to rethink that list, because that probably means that the student has not taken the time to really utilize these other resources to think critically about what is a good fit for me, not just what are the schools that are ranked X, Y, and Z. So again, I'm not saying rankings are inherently bad, but I think it's important to understand some of the pieces behind the rankings and how they can be limiting at times for students. So the truth I really, really want to hammer home is that college fit is everything. I, as a college advisor and as someone that has worked in higher education, feel so strongly and passionate about this. Students thrive. They thrive in a college environment that matches with what they're looking for, and in a school that can really propel them as they grow as a scholar and as a young person, as Bear Creek's mission says, into the individual God intends. And so I think it's really important to focus on college fit from the student perspective, first of all. So as I mentioned, I will talk about some resources for that, but there are so many ways that students can help differentiate between their college fit. I actually did a whole over-hour presentation on finding your best fit college, as I alluded to earlier, in November. If you were unable to attend that presentation, I would welcome you to send me an email, and I will send you the slide deck for that presentation, as it contains a lot of rich information on how students can and how parents can help guide this exploration of what it means to be a best fit school. Again, since that presentation was so long and in-depth, I can't use all of our time today talking about that, but I just want to hit a couple of the highlights. Understanding what a school offers for a student includes criteria such as size, location, cost, religious affiliation, level of intensity, etc. Malcolm Gladwell has a couple of really famous books, and he wrote one called David and Goliath, which many of you may be familiar with. And in this book, he argues that for many students, it is actually better, and he uses higher education as an example. It is much better to be a big fish in a small pond. That for many students, the ability to be successful, to be a strong student and be acknowledged as a strong student can be valuable. However, other students, I would argue, and Malcolm Gladwell would agree, crave the intensity of a highly rigorous competitive environment. That's just one example of how knowing yourself as a student and parents helping your children understand who they are is really valuable, because some students love and would welcome that intensity. Other students would be more successful in a scenario like Malcolm Gladwell suggests, which is at a school that is still a fantastic school, but doesn't have that reputation for incredible sort of intensity and almost a cutthroat nature. And so it's about knowing yourself. It's about knowing what size of school would benefit you. Are you the type of student that wants a small classroom where your voice can be heard? Do you prefer to sit in a lecture hall because you like to have time to absorb the information and then go to smaller breakout rooms to discuss after you've had that lecture? And like I said, I did a whole full presentation on this, and I could talk to you for another 2 hours, which I promise I won't, on this topic. But those are just a couple of the things to think about. And again, most of these are academic or institutional elements, but it's also important to think about what are the things outside of the classroom that matter. For some students, I have some seniors this year that are amazing musicians, and they're looking at great colleges, but also great colleges that have amazing arts programs that will allow them to continue playing music. I have other students, I have 2 students that signed their national letters of intent for playing soccer at their institutions, their colleges next year. So for some students, athletics plays a big role in that best fit. It's important to remember that a college decision is not a one-time choice. It is something that will impact you as a student over the 4 years of your college experience, and then also into the future as well. I always think it's valuable. This is a tip that I have, having worked in a college admissions office in many different capacities, and also actually at Bear Creek in the admissions office. I always encourage families and students to ask current students and alumni, what is your experience? There are forums on the internet that will allow students to do this. I would just encourage you to take those with a grain of salt. Some of them are very validated and reliable. Some of them, it's pretty easy to kind of make up a fake profile. So be thoughtful about that. But there are ways on schools' websites. All colleges have amazing websites now where they can share about the student experience. There's also, we have a great alumni network. So if Bear Creek students want to hear from an alumni who's been to that school, but hearing not just what the school says about themselves, but what those that have experienced it also say about the school experience. So again, just really emphasizing college fit. The last thing I want to say on that, I mentioned it from the student perspective, but I think this is so important to remember, and I think it's so often forgotten because most people haven't been in a college admissions committee meeting, but colleges are also looking for students that are a good fit for their school. And so you will oftentimes see that really factoring into an admissions decision. Does this student resonate with our mission? So I'll use Davidson as an example. Obviously, it's a small liberal arts college that focuses a lot on inquiry and curiosity. And so for students that just love learning, that are excited about jumping in, that's really where the book list comes from, right? Those are students that are going to thrive at Davidson because there's so many opportunities to be intellectually engaged. And schools all have their own mission. They all have their own sort of type of student that they think is a fit for their institution. And so I just always think it's good to remember that it's not just on the student side, it's also colleges making that evaluation of who do we believe are going to be students that thrive at our school, because that is incredibly important as well. Before we go into the next myth, I have a note to myself that I'm supposed to remind you all that we should have a couple minutes for Q&A at the end of this presentation. There is a box where you can pop your questions into. So if you do have questions, I welcome those. I'm not sure how long we'll have for Q&A, but I will try and leave a couple minutes to answer questions. So if you do, and please start doing that now. It does take a couple minutes actually for the questions to process through the system. So don't wait for when I put down my notes. If you have a question, then please pop that in the box now, and hopefully we'll get to those later. Okay, the next myth is that students should apply to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 colleges. And of course, I use a little bit of hyperbole, but I really truly have heard certainly students and parents say 20 plus. And again, this is understandable. This is why the context from the start of this presentation matters, is that as schools have multiplied and as acceptance rates have gone down and as the cost of tuition has gone up, and financial aid with colleges is, that's a process as well. So oftentimes families don't know what the final cost will be until students apply and get their offer. Families have encouraged students, and families are often encouraged to apply to more schools so that a student has more options, so that you can look at the different financial offers from institutions. And those are all really, really good reasons for this myth. And again, the thing that I think is really important to emphasize here, though, is that there is a way to do this to achieve those goals that I just talked about without applying to 30 schools, I promise. And there is a really high incentive, super high incentive, y'all, for colleges to encourage students to submit more and more applications. The two reasons for that are, number one, application fees. Not all schools, but many schools will require an application fee at the time a student submits the application. So that's, it's not, is it a massive moneymaker for colleges? No, I'm not saying that, but it is a revenue source for them. But far more importantly, is that the more students that apply, and again, I'm no math whiz, but the more students that apply means that they accept a smaller proportion of those students, which drives down their acceptance rate. And what do you think is one of the factors that increases a college's ranking? A lower acceptance rate. So once again, colleges are incentivized to encourage as many students as possible to apply, because then they can be more selective in who they pick. And an added benefit of that is that oftentimes, I shouldn't say 100%, but that is oftentimes something that can increase a school's ranking. So I just say that to share that with you. Again, I think it's important to just have that information to understand where colleges are coming from. I worked in that world. I'm not saying anything. I'm truly not disparaging colleges. I'm just explaining to you some of their incentive behind that. And again, on the flip side of that, it really allows them to select the students that they do believe are the absolute best fit for their school. So it's not just about the rankings for them either. They also want to be having the broadest selection as possible. However, as I mentioned, this is very costly for students, not just in money, but also time. Students, most colleges will ask them to write essays and fill out applications, so there's a lot of time and energy that goes into that, and it's just not necessary. The truth is that students should apply to a range of best fit schools. And of all the myths, I struggled most with what I should share with you, only because the number of schools that a student applies to is very personalized. It depends so much on what the student's goals are, what type of school they want to go to, etc. So I really want you all to hear that. At Bear Creek, that is again why this process is so personalized. It is one-on-one advising with me and the student and parents. You're invited into that conversation as well. So please hear that this is super personalized, and it's very hard to just give a generalized number of how many schools to apply to. I encourage students, a general rule of thumb is to apply to 8 to 10 colleges with a mixture of safety, mid-range, and reach schools. What those terms mean, we'll talk about in more depth. It's not really important right now, but just so you know, it's a range of schools, but all of those schools meet that criteria of being a good fit. And how do you do that? How do students do that? Again, that's where research comes in. It's about taking the time to research schools up front and crafting a college list that meets the criteria for what you are looking for as a student in your next 4 years after you graduate from high school. Again, just so you all know, some of my current seniors, I do have some applying to more than 10 schools, and I also have a handful that only applied to one school for a variety of reasons, whether that be athletics, whether that be a specific program. And so that's just to say, again, it's very personalized, and as you come up into the more hands-on advising process, we'll make sure that you know as a student and parents that we all are on the same page about what that list should look like. But again, it's about making smart decisions up front versus just throwing 30 darts at a dartboard and seeing what sticks. It's about making some of those really smart decisions up front about where to apply, which will allow students to be happy with their acceptances and have some great options, all of which they would be excited about when they make their ultimate decision. Okay, the last myth that I want to talk about is that there is a perfect school. And this is one I'm really passionate about. I mentioned this in the best fit presentation. I'll probably mention it in most of my advising presentations that I give because I hear this all the time. And I want to be clear that there are students that really know that a school is the right fit for them, and that is totally valid, and that happens. That still does not mean it is the perfect school. There will still be things about that school that might not be perfect for the student. However, it is about finding a fit. It is about finding a school that matches with the goals that a student has laid out for themselves. And the reason I feel so passionate about this is I think sometimes there's this fear that we're missing the perfect school. You know, where is that perfect school? I hear students agonizing over this as they're looking through and researching schools. And so I just think it's important to remember that all schools have pros and cons. No school is going to be perfect. It might be a better fit or not as good of a fit, but it's not perfect. And as I said, it's all about prioritizing what is important, and then also from that list of priorities, putting those in order of importance. So for some students, location is the most important thing. They want to stay in Washington, or they want to move to the East Coast. And if it's a small school on the East Coast or a large school or in Washington, you know, that is secondary. Size is secondary to location. For other people, size is the most important. So again, these are the types of conversations that we will be having if you're not a Bear Creek student, that you will be having with your college advisor, or if you go to school where advisors are not as accessible, then these are also conversations you can be having with yourself as well and as a family, and that's a great way for parents to step in. I also really want to emphasize the other truth about this is there are no perfect schools, but it's also about what you bring to campus as a student. I would often say that when leading information sessions at Davidson is what attitude, what excitement are you bringing to the school that you're attending in the fall? So I just think that's important to remember. Okay, so briefly, I want to go over, so what now? Now that we've learned about all of this, I really want to encourage you to keep 3 things in mind as you move through this college process, regardless of what age you are at, students, and parents, what age your kids are at as well. So the first thing is I would really encourage you to learn about the college process. We provide so many resources at Bear Creek to do so. I give a bunch of presentations. There's also books that I'm going to pop up on the slide in a second. There's a monthly newsletter that we put out. There's one-on-one advising, so many opportunities. It's also okay to talk to your friends, of course, parents or students, and read things on the internet. There's a lot of great resources out there. However, I really, really want you to be careful with well-intentioned misinformation because there is so much of that out there as well. And so just be thoughtful, think with a critical lens as you utilize those resources. The second is, again, to use the resources that Bear Creek offers, the highly personalized college and academic advising process, the events, the assemblies, and again, if you're not at Bear Creek, the resources your school offers. And then the last thing is to learn about yourself. The college process requires a lot of self-reflection of students, and we provide ways for students to gain insights into themselves at Bear Creek. But this is also a great thing, a great role for parents to play in this process. Parents, I encourage you to help your children learn about themselves and discern what is really valuable to them in this college journey. Okay, so I want to give us just a couple reminders as we wrap up here. I think the next slide is the book list. If you would like, this is a book list I actually published in a previous newsletter, which has been turned into a blog post, so you can find that on Bear Creek's website. And if you would like this slide deck, I'm happy to hand it out. You can take a picture of that list, whatever you want to do. But for different reasons, those are kind of 5 books I would recommend at least considering reading. Okay, so a couple things to not forget. The first is remember to use your resources and support. Bear Creek's mission is to enable each student to become the individual God intends. And so we so value and invest in our students here and in walking you as a family through this process. So take advantage of that because I love working with families. That's why I'm in this role. So take advantage of the resources and support that you have. The second is to embrace the journey. One of my favorite, albeit cliche expressions is that you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And I think for the college process, this is apropos. So don't try and digest all this information at once. Take the process as it comes in a calm manner. And there is a very natural timeline to this that we will help walk you through. For middle school students, that means really what you should be doing at this point is working hard in school and identifying academic interests and trying different activities and identifying what you like to do. For 9th and 10th graders, that means that you should keep working hard in classes and challenging yourself, again, as we discussed within the context of who you are as a student. And then starting to hone in on your activities and the ones that you really want to continue to invest additional energy and time into. And then really 11th grade is when this process starts, halfway through 11th grade in earnest. So we will walk you through this process step by step, but embrace the journey and don't worry about getting to the destination too quickly. And the last piece of advice and the last reminder is, again, really important to me, which is just a reminder that you are not defined by your college choice. In some ways, this can feel like a countercultural thing to say at times. There is a lot of cultural emphasis placed on college decisions and on this process. As I mentioned, college has really become such a formative time for students, and there's so many benefits to that. But I also think it's just so important to remember that this is not the defining choice in your life, and parents, it's not the defining choice in your child's life as well. I would love to leave you all before we get into some Q&A with this scripture from Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. We've talked a lot about college. There's a lot of factual information we've gone over tonight, but I would be remiss to not encourage us all to remember that I truly believe that God has a plan and a purpose for each and every student at the Bear Creek School and at every school, every student going through this college process. And just leaning on God and working together, again, as the mission says, on what God has, enabling each student to become the individual God intends. So with that, I have about 5 minutes or so, I believe. Karen, give me a thumbs up if I'm wrong for some Q&A. So I'll see. I haven't checked yet if anyone has asked any questions, so it might be a short Q&A or it might be a long Q&A. So, okay, no, I do have some great questions. Okay, good. So I will try and go through as many of these as possible. I absolutely apologize if I don't get to your question because we actually do have quite a few here. One question is, how important is SAT and ACT score now? It's a fantastic question. And that is a little bit complicated because many colleges have gone test optional. What I strongly would encourage for students, especially Bear Creek students, that's the program I know the best, so can speak to, is that students should take standardized testing seriously still. Many colleges are reevaluating whether or not they want to bring back standardized testing as a requirement. So we still offer pre-SAT, pre-ACT, and SAT on campus. And the advising department, we really do strongly encourage students to take that process seriously. Therefore, then if a student gets a strong score, they can send it. And for schools that are test optional, they do always have the option to not send it at the end of the day. And that's a very individualized decision that I talk to every single senior about. But I would encourage students to still take it seriously. There's a lot of reasons behind that. That would be another hour, maybe even 4-hour presentation. But that's the short answer. And I'm more than happy to, maybe that is a good presentation I should do in the future. Which grade do you recommend a student should start to prepare for college? So again, as I mentioned, really middle school and the start of high school, the best things students can be doing are investing in their community, academically, with activities, just exploring and enjoying the community that they're part of, getting involved. We have so many opportunities for students, not just to get involved, but, attending fun events. We have I think it's either this weekend or just happened, some fun dances and activities, and there's so many different ways for students to just invest in their community. And then the second half of junior year is when students should really start putting college more in the front seat and start thinking about their colleges, start doing that research. And then over the summer between junior and senior year is when I personally, as an advisor, encourage students to start their applications, start crafting their essays, and start finalizing their college list. That college list will not be set in stone. I still have some seniors that are making modifications to their list, which is completely normal. So the list in the summer is not set in stone, but you start transitioning from research to making a list of these are the schools that I think would be a fit. Okay. Another question, can you talk about the usefulness versus the expense of additional or boutique college application prep? That is a great question. So there's so many forms that sort of additional college application prep can take. There are prep classes and tutors for standardized testing. There are tutors that will help students specifically with essays. There are tutoring programs that will help students through every step of the process, help them with their application, help them with their list. There are some really great programs out there, and if you're looking for specifics of like a test prep program, I'm happy to offer some ideas that I have. I can email those out to whoever this person is. But what I would say is similar to what I said about really think critically about the information that you hear. Really think critically about if it's an individualized tutor, what their background is and what their experience is, because this is a huge money-making market, to just be honest. And some people are phenomenal at what they do and they're really knowledgeable. But there are also people out there that are not as knowledgeable, and I've seen the impact of that on students and how that can impact them. So just be a really educated consumer is, I guess, my best recommendation. At Bear Creek, you certainly don't need to hire someone on the college application process. I can't test prep your students. We do offer the practice tests, but some families want that, and certainly, depending upon your school circumstances, that may be something. But just be an educated consumer. And then I know we're coming up on time and I still have a bunch more questions, which I apologize we can't get to. I'll just answer this last one here. Just because I think it kind of is a great wrap up, and then I'll turn it back over to Karen. And again, I apologize, there's tons of questions I did not get to. So I do apologize if I didn't answer yours, but this person asks, is there a possibility of not getting accepted everywhere you apply? And I love that question. Thank you for asking it, because yes. And honestly, the answer is probably, as a student, you will not get accepted everywhere you apply. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, you're only going to one college. And I promise you, you're not going to remember, I got into this school, didn't get into this school. And even if you do remember, I promise it's not going to be relevant to you. The goal is to, through this process, discern and find a best fit school and a school that matches your goals, and then attend there. So yes, it's very likely that you will not get accepted to all of them, but that's okay. That's a natural part of the process. And I think that's a great reminder. So thank you all so much. I wish I could answer all your questions. They're awesome. I have really just loved getting to share with you tonight, and I hope that this was relevant and helpful for you all. I believe Karen put my email in the chat. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them, and I'll turn it back over to her.
Thank you, Katie. This was so informative, and I just appreciate your wealth of knowledge and insight and to all the information. I have a couple slides to show you real quick. If you go to the Q&A, you will see Katie's email as she stated, but also the link to our Bear Creek College Advising. Just let you know, this is the Tools for Success series. Go ahead, Pete, put the next slide up, please. This is our next Tools for Success. Is coming up on February 7th. Be sure it's going to be very valuable. We have Mr. and Mrs. Urban speaking at this one. And also, if you go to the same page, look at the very bottom, you will see the recordings of our previous recordings, including this one. But because you attended tonight, you'll be receiving our PowerPoint as well as recording tomorrow, along with a survey, which we would love to hear your insight. We also would love to let you know that I'm going to send you something here in the Q&A as well, some links to make it easy for you. We have something called the Bear Conversations. These are very valuable, where you get to know our middle and upper school faculty and get to some insight on to who they are and what we do here at Bear Creek. Also, the next one, if you're interested in our upper school, middle school, lower school, we did a series called the Discover Bear Creek, and we have all the open house recordings there. So be sure to check that out as well if you're interested. And then we also have a couple of mission slides. I just want to let you know, January 23rd is a very big date for those from outside our community that are interested in learning, just seeing if Bear Creek is a place for you. Just so you know, we have a lot of current parents. You will be receiving your re-enrollment email on January 17th, on Tuesday, and at that point you can submit you'll just sign up for your re-enrollment. Here are some other deadlines for you. As I put in the link, just go to our admissions page to see all these decisions. Also, what's really important, if you go to our admissions page, Bear Creek sticker price shock could be for some, and you need to go look that we have need-based tuition. And then also, what's very exciting now, we have some scholarships available as well, and we're very blessed by these scholarships. So don't let money be an issue for you. Please investigate more about we have 25% of need-based students here, so we're very, very fortunate as a school that's 34 years. And let's see, we have the contact in the next page. If there's any more questions regarding admissions, there's your contacts right there. We would like to say thank you again for joining us. Look for your email tomorrow. Again, we'll have a recording as well as the PowerPoint from tonight's presentation. You all have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us on a Tuesday night. You stay safe, and God bless you all. Have a good night.